Making a bowl on the wheel. Pound a well-wedged piece of clay into a ball and attach it to a dry wheel head. Make sure the wheel head's dry. Extra wiping can help. And you'll smack it down into the center and then pound it down with your hands. Get your hands wet and the clay wet. Scoot yourself up close to the wheel and start the wheel at a moderately high wheel speed. First thing you'll do is press the clay onto the wheel head to make sure that it's going to stay firmly attached. Then, keeping it very wet, you'll cone the clay up. Keeping it wet, you'll continue to cone the clay up into a tall cone that consolidates the clay and helps to get out the wobbles. My arms are set on my legs, my elbows especially, and I will now push the clay down, but slowly from the top until I get it about halfway, hoping to steady just half that clay. Then as I push down more, I'll go even slower and carefully steady the clay till I'm back down to the base. I use my fingers to press out weird bumps and bubbles. I use my palms of my hands. I use both hands very strongly. And I'll hold the clay nice and steady and push it down into a disc like a hockey puck. When the clay spins around smoothly in my hands, it's time to open up the clay. I put my hands around it and my two thumbs right through the center of the clay till I'm about a 1/4 inch from the bottom. Anytime there's friction, I gently let go and add water. Then I'll push down till I'm about a 1/4 inch from the bottom of the clay to the wheel head, and I check with my pin tool to make sure I've got a 1/4 inch of clay at the base of this bowl to the wheel head. Most likely I've done it correctly. There we go. Now, in order to throw a bowl, you'll make sure to get your middle hand in the center, your outside hand holding the clay steady, and you're going to scoop the clay up from the inside into a rounded bowl-like shape. When you throw a bowl, you're throwing the bowl from the inside first. The outside of the pot will stay straight, maybe go somewhat on a diagonal line, but does not have a curve. The curve begins on the inside of the bowl only. This is so that the clay can be supported while you're creating a wide enough piece. Since the clay is so plastic, you can't get the curve on the outside too soon, otherwise it'll flop. So if you'll see, the outside of the bowl right now is straight, only slightly on a diagonal, and the inside of the bowl is rounded. Every time I pull up from the inside, my hand goes right back to the center of the clay. So I'll get it wet, my hands will go to the center of the clay, and I'll scoop and round the clay from the inside while my outside hand holds the clay steady. When I put my hands on the inside of the clay, I'm scooping it up from the very bottom and scooping and rounding it up as I pull up. I'll do numerous pulls from the inside, back from the center, and then scooping the clay open, rounded, and wide, while my outside hand holds the clay steady and supports it, but still keeps the clay pretty straight on the outside. I'm still stretching up the clay though. I'm stretching up the clay from the base up to the rim so that I start to create even walls from the bottom all the way up to the opening of the bowl. As I do this, I'm looking carefully at the inside of my bowl especially to make sure I have a nice rounded curve from the very center of the pot and then as it moves up and out towards the rim. I have a few tries to create the inside of the bowl. In fact, more tries to create the inside of the bowl than the outside of the bowl. So I'll just be scooping and rounding until the clay is thin enough and I've used enough from the base that it's time now to also round the outside of the bowl so the outside curve will match the inside curve. Don't have that many opportunities to adjust the outside curve of the bowl because the clay is so plastic, because it's been stressed and stretched so much. So now my inside hand is going to create that curve and my outside hand is going to let that curve come out so that from the outside of the bowl I'll also see a rounded form that then I'll pull all the way up to the rim. You can have about 3 or 4 chances to make that nice rounded form on the outside that matches the inside roundedness. But you don't have that many more chances because the clay has stressed, is wet, and will be very weak, especially at that point between the base and the top of the pot, where if it's too wet and too stressed, it can't hold that shape. So, good luck. Then you're going to bend the top rim out just a tad because the rim will dry and shrink in too much when you're creating a bowl. So stretch the outside rim, and that finishes the throwing of the bowl. You can take off excess clay with a pin tool down at the base, and that's if you're pretty careful with a pin tool. You can stick it into the extra hunk of clay underneath the pot near the base that didn't get stretched up, and you'll dig in from above and then from below and then peel that wedge of clay off and away from the bottom of the pot. You'll see from this point of view some of the curve of this pot. This is when we're releasing the clay from the bottom, and then that will get cut and peeled off. So here's the bowl, and here's the bowl with the outside curve matching the inside curve. It's ready to be taken off the wheel.